when I was browsing online the other day, I came across this offering from Crosley. So ostensibly, the company manufacturer of dubious quality turntables is now deciding to dabble in manufacture of dubious quality replica payphones. And these replica payphones from Crosley are no doubt cheaper, a significant amount cheaper than buying the real deal. And because it's actually rather difficult to track down a genuine, honest-to-goodness payphone that was once in use at one particular point in time in the past, I figured I might as well go ahead and buy one of these, if for nothing more than just to have as a conversation piece, a conversation starter, and have something a bit of a novelty in the interim of tracking down an actual legitimate payphone. So this payphone claims that it's going to take us back to the days of old-fashioned phone booths and 10-cent phone calls. And while you don't have to pay for your calls, this replica, you will enjoy the classic design and modern calling convenience. Well, I don't know if that's all it's cracked up to be, or at least this phone is all it's cracked up to be. So this has a rotary dial fashion plate. This does not actually have a rotary dial. It's just a little plate that they've put, and you have push button, touch tone buttons for dialing the phone numbers, a redial button, ringer volume on and off, a tone and pulse switch. I'm pretty surprised that in this modern age that there's still a modern phone that has the ability to switch between using pulse dialing and touch tone dialing. Earpiece volume control switches, a jingling coin bank with lock and key, and of course it is wall mountable. Here's the payphone outside of the box. It's a refreshing change to see the lack of styrofoam insulation used. I was really under the impression that I was going to have to drag out the vacuum just to facilitate cleaning up the mess that would no doubt be made after unpacking this phone and removing it from the box that it shipped in if it were packaged using styrofoam. But thankfully that was not the case with this payphone. They just used these cardboard inserts to keep it from moving around and possibly breaking in the box, and some plastic. That's the extent of the packaging insulation that's used in this particular model, which is quite nice. I am really getting to my wit's end with having to deal with the mess that styrofoam packing peanuts or those styrofoam inserts make when you try to unpack anything that is used with it. And apparently this must be the Crosley model CR56 1950s classic replica payphone. It does come with an instruction manual and an incredibly flimsy, cheap, and insignificant key. I would be afraid to bend this thing if I were to breathe on it. Because as I alluded to earlier on, this does not accept coins to make telephone calls. It acts as a mere piggy bank of sorts, wherein you simply insert your coins, whether it be quarters, nickels, or dimes, into the coin slot on the top of the phone or in the coin return lever. But I'll get to that in just a moment. Let's take a look at the handset, which happens to be packaged rather neatly alongside of it. And one thing right off the bat that I really must say was a very poor design choice, but really par for the course with a company such as this: a permanently mounted modular handset cord that's permanently attached to the receiver. Now, I don't know about anyone else, but for any length of time, or at least if I've used the phone for any length of time, the coiled handset cord begins to get tangled, begins to get stretched out, and sometimes it just gets to be too much of a mess to actually be worth using. And so every now and again I'll have to end up just throwing out the cord and putting a fresh handset cord on, as is standard practice with most any corded phone. However, it seems that is not the case with this phone, again, because it's permanently mounted to this phone's receiver. However, since it's just a simple modular cord design, you could throw this whole thing out and just use an actual proper telephone handset with a modular style cord. And the nice thing is that this cord is rather long. I'm pleasantly surprised that the cord is long enough. I think this thing would extend to something around 15, maybe even 20 feet if you're lucky and don't mind stretching the cord. Surprisingly, especially for a company like this, they do go ahead and give you a rather decently sized 5, 6, or maybe even a 7-foot modular RJ11 telephone line cord to facilitate your connecting this up to your phone service, whether it be regular POTS, fiber-based, or even VoIP-derived phone service. Whatever it is, it'll work, providing it has a standard RJ11 modular connector. And here is the phone in all of its cheap plastic glory. And metal parts are certainly in the minority on this phone. I don't think that there are going to be any metal parts on this phone, except maybe the locks. So, however, I'm sure they're just fake and totally plastic, so that remains to be seen. But having said that, it is appropriately styled to a circa 1950s telephone. The only letdown, of course, is the lack of an actual rotary, a true rotary dial. You have this faux rotary dial, which is just like a sticker, and then you have the push buttons, which I guess they're attempting to disguise here, which you actually use to dial the phone. So you can't use this to dial like you would with a traditional 1950s rotary dial telephone. You do have 25-cent quarter, 10-cent dime, and 5-cent nickel coin slots, which again do not affect the calling performance or the usability of this telephone. Inserting any sort of coin, whether it be before, during, or after a phone call, simply drops through all the way down into the coin vault below. And true to form, this does have an informational placard below the dial, and it says local call 10 cents. Well, you don't even have to insert any sort of coin to make a telephone call on here, so that's a bit misleading. And the Crosley logo emblazoned upon the front. Contrary to what you'd think this button would do, judging by its label telling you it's a coin release, it is actually a simple redial button. So if you happen to dial a phone call, dial a phone number, and you get disconnected and you need to redial the phone number, well, if you don't feel like dialing the entire 10 or 11 digit phone number, you need only press the coin release button, which will redial the call and send a very fast rapid fire sequence of DTMF tones. You have this incredibly cheap and flimsy switch hook. I wouldn't really trust using this thing on heavy rotation. It's entirely plastic, so any amount of use will probably, no doubt, wear this thing out, but it was working for the limited amount of time I was testing it. And of course the switch hook itself is cheap plastic as well. I don't think I've yet to see any sort of metal part used. Oh yeah, there we go. Screws. I think that's the only the only metal parts that you're going to find on this huge piece of plastic. The coin vault is plastic as well, although it has a fake chrome finish, which is not only a scratch and fingerprint magnet, but also a smudge magnet. Your coin release, if I don't knock this phone over, you have your coin release lever here, which I believe does the exact same thing as putting in coins up over here on the coin slots. I guess this is for those of you who might be a bit impatient, just want to throw a whole bunch of coins in here for safekeeping. Now turning this around, we're not going to be in for much of a treat. More plastic. We have a few switches here for the ringer control, high, low, and off settings, which is quite nice if you don't have any ability to enable do not disturb, or you don't want your phone going off. You can simply shut that off. If you have older pulse dialing only service, well, you can enable this as well. Or you have newer touch tone DTMF service, you can switch that as well. So I know there's actually quite a few people out there that don't want to pay the phone company a couple extra dollars each month to enable the ability to dial using a newer touch tone phone, and so they still need to have some sort of an ability to dial using pulse dial sequences. So it's quite nice that this is actually included on this phone. I wouldn't have expected this on such a cheap, chintzy, and modern day replica phone from the Crosley company. And we have a handset receiver volume control for high, medium, and low modes of operation. However, during my basic testing, I noticed that when you would switch this up to high, it would really not help much with the actual receiving and hearing the other person's conversation. And amazingly, this phone is not even all that old. It's only from January of 2014, and as of the recording of this video, it's August of 2015. You do have your RJ11 modular phone line connection here. This is where you would go about connecting this up to your telephone line. And obviously this is not a two-line telephone, so if you have two-line telephone service, you won't be able to take advantage of that fact. However, I am pleased to see that they did at least think to put some plastic pegs in here so as to facilitate wrapping up the excess wire you might have after connecting this up to your phone line. Let me tell you, Crosley spared no expense with this model. They even went to the trouble of putting in a cheap, chintzy, shrill, high-pitched piezo electric ringer, which sounds absolutely awful. While I really didn't expect them to go to the trouble of putting in a mechanical bell ringer, such that would be found in an actual payphone of this age and era. I was a bit disappointed to hear that they put such a low quality and absolutely abhorrent ringer in this phone. And I neglected to mention earlier that this is the modular connected for the actual handset. I'll go ahead and put this phone on this extremely... I could feel the plastic swaying, bending when I'm hanging the phone up. Okay, I've gone ahead and moved the phone to the area in which the phone line is located. I'm going to go ahead and place a phone call to it now, and you will no doubt hear the absolutely shrill, terrible, and cheap ringer that's in this phone. Yes, your speakers do not deceive you. That's the ringer that they elected to use in this replica payphone. Now, another little problem I discovered with this payphone, and I alluded to this a bit earlier on in the video, is that the other person's end of the line is extremely quiet. It's very difficult to hear them, especially when your audio is so much louder than theirs. Changing the handset receiver volume to high or medium, but that just amplifies the audio that's coming through, the feedback that's coming through the microphone of the receiver. So the other person on the other end of the line will only get marginally louder, but your audio, the feedback from this carbon microphone, will get so much louder that it's like listening to yourself through a pair of headphones. And seeing as how this was manufactured by Crosley, or whichever company, shell company now manufactures this, and simply throws the Crosley name on it in an effort to fool buyers into thinking that this is a high quality item, it comes as no surprise that this is an absolute waste of money and incredibly cheap, flimsy, and chintzy.